Okay. I don't want to do this one. Okay, gotcha. That's regular. Okay, thank you so much.
We got a few more people coming in, so give it a little minute. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Atis and I'm one of the trustees of Palmer Lake, and I'll be giving you some information that I think people need to know about. And at the end, we're going to have an opportunity for people to ask questions. Without further ado, I do need to read this disclaimer. Myself and Trustee Roger Mosley, we're hosting this informational briefing for the public as two members of the 7-member Board of Trustees. It is not a meeting of the full board. No board business will be deliberated, and no board action will be taken. The matters summarized are drawn from public records, publicly filed court documents, and referral to public authorities. Allegations contained in any litigation have not been adjudicated.
Okay.
Do not disturb is now on.
You got that covered? So the question is, this is, essentially tonight's agenda. Who serves you, transparency and accountability, financial concerns, town staff and attorney transitions, legal items. Do you have a question?
Yes, Atis, sorry to interrupt, but I hear an echo, like someone is broadcasting it in here. And it might be, I don't think it's you, I think it's somebody else broadcasting this in here. The mic is creating an echo.
All right. I can talk loud enough, I think. Anyway, and the last item is your questions. One of the important things is, as trustees, we have an email address that not everybody knows to send an email, take a question or concern, or you can't always come to a board meeting and make public comment. So here's an opportunity for you to provide some information if you're interested. So the question is, how did we get here? It's kind of a long, torturous path at times, it seems. 18 months ago, December 2024, I and two others were elected to be trustees for the 2025-26 years. Since then, there's been a lot of changes in the composition, not only the board of trustees, but also the town staff. Starting with Dawn Collins was the administrator and town clerk. She opted to go for another position out, I think, in Wisconsin. And Len Smith, who's here, was put in to be the interim town administrator. That was a year ago. And he's kind of tired of the job because he's not only the administrator, but also the police chief. Then, shortly thereafter, the former mayor, Lan Hadler, resigned. Now, it was published in the paper, her reasons for resigning, but there also were published text messages that were not very nice to citizens as well as trustees, myself included. Why did she resign? She has her own reasons. At the same time, the citizens were, of Palmer Lake, were a little bit concerned about what's happening with the town, particularly with the coming of Buc-ee's coming into the town. So petitions were filed for 3 trustees. As well as that, there was a ballot initiative wanting to give the people of Palmer Lake an opportunity to vote on any annexation, not just Buc-ee's, but all future annexations, so the people have a choice in that. Result of that, the ballot issue was passed in September, and 2 of the 3 trustees were recalled and replaced by people who were elected by the people. One was Roger Mosley, the other one was Beth Harris. The 3rd trustee was Dennis Stern, but since Lane Havner resigned, the board, by majority vote, opted to make him the acting mayor until the Lance's term ended. Since then, we've had 3 other trustees resign for whatever reason. Tim Keynes was one. He had enough petition signatures to be recalled, but he opted to resign to save the town money. Amy Hudson resigned as well, and Mike Wade was the 3rd one. As a result, we've got 3 more trustees: John Marble, Tony Beltran, and Mike Beeson. So you can see that it's been a kind of challenge to get things done because we're always in flux at some point in time, and there's always differences of opinion, as you all probably have in your lives. When you get 2 people together, there's always an argument. So that's how we got here. Now, along the same lines, the town staff, as I mentioned before, we lost our town administrator. Not only that, we also lost, in the last few years, 3 town attorneys. One was convicted of felony, and it was not related to town business. His replacement resigned and then was acting as an interim town attorney, but then the board decided that we did not agree with some of his opinions, and he was voted out. The 3rd one recently resigned from the town after about 2 months of service. So right now we have an RFP going out to look for another town attorney. At the same time, we've had 2 water works people leave. One was Steve Orca, who retired, the other was Jeremy Dunda, and there's some legal implications that I will go into. So moving on. Now, I've been harping on transparency and accountability, right? That was why I ran for trustee. And I'm going to read something from the town website. In February 2025, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution amending the town mission as follows. The town Board of Trustees hereby declares their mission is to provide leadership, preserve our community dynamic with thoughtful growth in partnership with the citizens of the town of Palmer Lake. Serving the community to provide public services and safety while respecting the diversity and values of our citizens. Maintaining trust through effective communication, transparency, and partnership with the community. Now, that's a key word to me is trust and effective communication, and this is one attempt that I have to provide effective communication to the community. And then lastly is to support a healthy economic environment to ensure Palmer Lake's future. Now, along those lines, the town administrator, clerk, and town attorney will follow directives from the Board of Trustees as a body. That means individual board members may implement the directives by bringing it to the board for the action, but the board has to decide whether to implement the policy or not. Town staff, other than the town administrator or clerk, will take direction solely from the town administrator or a direct supervisor of that position. And I want to emphasize, the town board of trustees is responsible for making policy. Town staff is responsible for implementing that policy. Once a decision is made, board members and staff accept and support the decision moving forward. That's something we've had some difficulties over the past 18 months. Now, everybody, instead, there's going to be people saying this: we are going broke. Town of Palm Lake is going broke. And here's my last topic is financial concerns. We do have financial concerns, and that's part of our responsibility as board of trustees as a fiduciary to make sure that the town maintains good public services, public safety, and make sure that the town can survive going into the next 20 or 30 or 100 years. You may not remember, not too long ago, a few years ago, there's a time capsule or time chest put into the town hall that's to be open in 50 years. Now, I certainly won't be around for that, but my granddaughter will be, and she has a letter from me saying you need to come at the 50th and help open the time capsule. And there's a myriad of artifacts and items and books are in there. So when we talk about financial concerns, one that's kind of near and dear for a lot of people is the Elephant Rock property. It was donated to the town in 2019. So here we are 7 years later, and we're finally getting something done with just a piece of it. The rest of the property is kind of a limbo. And there's a lot of questions, and hopefully you will put in your questions to the board of trustees and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to do this with the remaining property? There's some talk about expanding the open space, the green space, the hiking trails, possibly put a public safety building there for the fire department and police department. Or, there's some movement for it. We have, if you ever driven by the property, there's a big sign, KCRE. They're a realtor, and they're looking to sell a piece of the property to generate some revenue for the town. Because right now, it's not making a whole lot of money for the town, but it does cost a lot of money to maintain. The other big concern is our town's ability to sustain our fire department. Every year, we have to tap into the general fund to make sure that they have enough money to keep operating. As you know, the building is fairly old, and the fire department has two, I guess, you can almost call them antique fire engines. My fear is someday something going to break on one of those fire trucks, and there aren't any parts left because they have to go scavenging for them. So one of the things we've been looking at as a board of trustees is talking with the Monument Fire Department, saying maybe we can do some consolidation to improve, response times, the fire, I guess the fire rating. This Monument seems to have a better fire rating, but there's some pros and cons. Some of the cons are, if we merge with Monument Fire, do we lose our fire department? Do we lose the Palmer Lake Star? Where will the fire department operate? Is it going to still operate at Palmer Lake or outside in Monument? So land use and development. As I mentioned before, one of our challenges has been we've got a high turnover of not only board of trustees because we get to vote on these things, but also the town staff, the town attorney, administrator, and some of the other staff, identifying what makes the most sense for land use. And then the big question is future annexations. We have a master plan, and a lot of us invoke in regards to do we want something like make a travel center, or do we want small mom-and-pop businesses? So that's an underlying question, is what do we want to annex if we do? What kind of businesses do we want in Palmer Lake? We want small mom and pop. If we do, how can we best support the existing businesses as well as the future? And that's a big question about economic development. Sales tax revenue versus property taxes. To balance the budget, if you have more sales tax revenue, then you don't have to go to citizens asking for a mill increase for your property. But if we have to, then it's going to be a vote of the people decide whether or not to do a mill increase. So your thoughts on what you want to do is one of the things with the fire department. If we merge with climate and fire, we may. You might see an increase in your property tax because their mill levy is a little bit higher than what Palmer Lake does. So that's kind of short synopsis of financial concerns. I already touched on the town staff and attorney transitions, and it's been said that we don't have a town attorney. We don't have an attorney for the town. So one of my questions is, how many attorneys does the town of Palmer Lake need? Because we employ employers' counsel for certain things. We recently engaged SGS Litigations, Lisa Getchis. Third law firm is Atis and Davis. They're in the process of terminating Bucky's engagement. We're still not free of Bucky's right now. There's Sursa, which is our insurance company, and they're addressing the lawsuits that have been placed against the town. Now, recently, because J-Man or Mr. Ken Whitmer resigned, we temporarily employed Lions Guinness for special projects for land use to get caught up with some of this land use and zoning requirements. And then we also have a future town attorney. So at some point in time, it'd be nice to consolidate to maybe one or two attorneys rather than right now we have 6. Possibly 6, sorry. Now, town administrator, we've been working on that for a year now. We've been kind of started and stopped a few times because, we don't have a full board. We want a full board because the administrator position is very critical to the town. But now that we have a full board, we've started up again, and the last word I got, and hopefully will be brought up at the board meeting this Thursday, there's 27 applicants identified by SGR who is our recruiting firm. Hopefully they're going to do some good vetting and narrow it down so that we don't have to interview 27 people. We'd like to get the right people for the job. And so now one thing that has come up has been some of the questions, regarding the interaction between the board and the town staff as far as processes. And I've done a referral to outside agencies because one, they might be criminal in intent, and that's not the role for a civilian or elected official. So I've asked, I've reached out to the Colorado Attorney General, the El Paso County DA, and Colorado Bureau of Investigation, because they're a neutral, impartial unit. So there's several acts that I referred for this investigation. Now, They're just to be investigated. You know, I'm not an attorney or a judge, so I can't make a judgment whether these are valid or not. But it's got unauthorized public spending on outside counsel, illegally closed executive session, unauthorized practice by a non-attorney, you know, some commingling the police chief and administrative roles. Unfortunately, you know, Glenn has had to step in and do both roles, and there's some questions about, is that proper in everything he does? And we're just asking for clarification. So along those lines, I was going to turn this over to Mr. Mosley, because he has a little bit more detail about the lawsuits pending against the town on the lake.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Roger Mosley. I was elected on, I think, the 9th of September and sworn in on the 25th of September. And this is briefing is going to cover about 4 years to show you how we got here to where we have such animosity, or at least division between my staff and myself. I just want you all to understand that. So, to begin with, Marty, my wife, was appointed to the Planning Commission. And it didn't take very long for a couple of the other planners to suggest things that appeared to be violations of all metal. And by the way, I'll try not to say anything that we don't have absolute records for, copies of emails, those kinds of things. And her tenure on the Planning Commission, because she's sort of a code compliance kind of person, that any suggestion that we should violate the code offended her, and at one point she finally decided she had to resign. But while she was on the Planning Commission, we became more aware of town politics. And one of the things that got my attention was the mayor's message of 22 May 2022. It was called the mayor's message, and it had 3 things wrong with it. First of all, it was obvious that the mayor did not know that the town did not own Monroe Lake Sanitation, that it was a private company. The mayor also did not know that the water enterprise was controlled by Tabor, and that the finances of the water enterprise were particularly corrupt. And there was also a substantial tax increase suggested in that memorandum from the mayor. Well, that got my attention right away, because I disagreed with all of it. Oops. We've got to go back. So we got to back up a couple slides. I don't know where the button is. Let me just see if the page up button will work. Yeah, here we go. There. I'm sorry. That's the slide I was talking about. So you can see the mayor's message is at the second end of the line. And eventually, I discovered that Michael Maddox was living in the TLCA building, which was zoned commercial, which was prohibited by our own code. So I went to Dawn Collins and I asked her to do something about it. Because in the code we had at the time, before it went to community code, she was the zoning control officer. She refused to do anything about it. And so I wrote her a demand letter to dismiss Administrator Collins. Well, that infuriated both Matt Probb, who was our lawyer, and Bill Bass, who was our mayor. Sorry, that was a violation of the code. I disagree with it. They got a demand letter. Okay, so that sort of started the division between Marty and I and the staff. So the second thing, and I know a lot of people, you know about the financial lawsuit. Let me tell you a few details. As we started watching the town finances, and we started coring, Colorado Open Records Act, we started asking for documents that the town was making decisions on. And one of the things we found was the ARPA grant. It's a federal grant. It was $750,000, and it was restricted to potable water capital projects only, period, end of story. There was one other exception. You could do broadband. You could expand your town broadband coverage. But basically, if you're going to spend the money on water, it had to be spent on a capital project. All of that money was spent on maintenance and operations. That was a violation of the law. Now, just for your information about my background, because I'm a recognized federal contract fraud expert in the federal courts. I could not look at this and say, no big deal. I was obligated to say something about this. And that's why we got started on the lawsuit. The second thing we found was the next money that came in was the $970,000 from the FAST Act. What is FAST? Federal Surface Transportation. I can't think. What?
Fixing.
Yeah, fixing the federal surface transportation system. And it was restricted to either highways, real highways, not city streets, but real highways. But there was one exception, and it was for improving safety. So the town applied for this money and described their safety improvement as the street in front of the Palmer Lake Elementary School. So it's called the PLES project. When you look into the project itself, it was actually a water project, another violation of the law. So we had to say something about that. Okay? And then there were state water funds. And they weren't big. They were $25,000, $50,000, small amounts of money. But when we got that money, in order to use it, we had to put matching funds against that money. And the matching funds had to come from the water enterprise, not the general fund. And we paid the matching funds from the general fund. Another violation. Okay? We also have 2 water loans from the state and 1 water loan from ourselves, from our general fund, $500,000 to the water fund. The issue about that general fund loan is we can't quite figure out how it gets paid back because it came out of one pocket and went into another pocket on the same person. Now, I'm not saying we're not paying it back, but it's very difficult to see the water enterprise funds going down and the general fund going up as it's paid back. And it's one of the issues that we would like to have a discussion with the town staff over, because Don Collins insisted for 3 years we had 1 checking account. About 3 months ago, Erica Romero said, oh no, we've got 2 checking accounts. We don't know how they're being used and how the money is being segregated. And the fact that the money is being commingled between the general fund and the water fund is a problem. Okay? So we filed a lawsuit. And the lawsuit, as you all know, is a False Claims Act, which means if we win it, the government can take back all the money. They can take back the $750 and the $970, okay? And we get to have 30% of it. We don't want the money. We stipulated to the court that if there's any money awarded, that it's going to nonprofits to help the community. We don't care about the money, okay? I want to be very clear about that. What we want is we want a little bit of a punishment to make sure that people don't violate these kinds of rules in the future. We think it's extremely serious and offends me personally. I'll tell you that. Okay, next slide. Okay, there is a letter which I received from Glenn Smith on the 9th of April, I believe. And what this letter is titled is the conclusion and summary of charges and complaints against me. Now, the letter is interesting because, first of all, it accuses me of being a stalker. I'm going to talk about that later. The investigator finds it more likely than not that on numerous occasions, I raised my voice in an intimidating tone and stood in close proximity to staff members in a aggressive manner. Probably no doubt that I raised my voice, but I don't think it was intended to intimidate or harass, and I'll let you all make your own minds up about that. One interesting charge in here is that I pointed a pin at Erica Romero during the election process. I wasn't a trustee then. You can't cite a violation when you're not a trustee. You can't violate it. Okay, so it's just an interesting little piece in here. And one of the favorite words I have seen in emails and back and forth with the staff is the word derogatory. I'm going to give you an example of one of the really terrible derogatory messages I sent to Ms. Romero. It said, and I think I quote, "You do not have the authority to make this decision." I got back an email that said, "Cease sending those derogatory emails to the staff." Okay, I don't understand that. So if anybody wants a copy of this, we'll make it available on the web. I've already sent it to several people, so it's not a private item, and you can make your own decisions on that. So let's move on. This letter also accuses me of creating a toxic workspace. Well, this appears to only be the town administrative office, not the parks guys, not the roads guys, not the water guys. Don Collins maintained, this is historical, a tight control over information from the staff. She would not allow department heads to speak in board meetings in a general way. I mean, once in a while they did, but she absolutely wouldn't allow that. And then many times, the things that she would tell the board were not what the department head wanted to tell the board. So I went and asked. This is before as a trustee. Okay? Glenn Smith has continued to restrict staff employee statements to the board. That, I think, continues to build this toxic atmosphere that's existed for quite some time. Another example is the deputy clerk, and that was Erica Romero. When she came on duty, I think in January of last year, I had a couple of queries that I needed answered. Well, that was about the time that Don Collins was out looking for a job and finally wound up going to Wisconsin. And I got a response from Erica that she could not answer the queries because the document control officer wasn't here, which means the deputy clerk couldn't actually do any clerk work because the real clerk was absent. Okay. Well, I didn't know we had a document control officer. Once I found out, then oh sure I can comply with that. Now, I just want to say that I have never worked in the office. I always call the office before I go to the office, because way back when all this started, Bill Bass restricted Marty and I from going to the office because we were dangerous people. Okay? So we call every time before we go up there, we get an appointment, we go up, we spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is, take care of whatever question we've got, and we're out of there. I have probably not been to the office, even before as a trustee, more than about once a month, maybe less than that, over the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't know how I built the toxic workspace. I allege it came from something else. Okay? Oh, by the way, in Scotty Crob's invoices, he talks about getting complaints in where the staff feels uncomfortable or the staff is concerned. Now, I don't know what specifically about that, but what they think is that I'm going to come up and ask them a hard question. What they don't admit is, I can't fire anybody on the staff. Okay? And the only people I can get at is Glenn and Erica, because they work directly for the board. And then it takes 3 more votes. So why they're concerned, maybe they just don't like me or they think I'm offensive. Fine, I will take that condemnation if somebody would just say so. But so far, nobody says so. All right, let's move on. So you can see sort of where we're headed. So let me talk about the investigation, which is this letter is the basis of this letter. On 11 December, I had said in November I want to fire him. And I was angry at him for several things, some really what I thought were poor pieces of legal advice. And he marched in on 11 December, and I thought we were going to have a hearing, back and forth. He was mad because I would not engage him on my complaints on email. I want to do it right here in the board meeting. So he got up, and if any of you were at that board meeting, he talked for an hour and 15 minutes. I am risking, I wanted to call the medics so we could help him out, because I figured he dislocated his arm, pat himself on the back. That was an hour and 15 minutes, and then at the end, he went, and I quit. What? So I don't understand that, but he just quit. Okay, thank you very much. So on the 14th of January, I did an open records request for those complaints. And Erica refused them. And she refused them because the investigation was not over. Okay, fine, I can accept that. I disagree, but I'll accept that. So I went up and voluntarily submitted to an interview by this outfit called Employers Council. And I think they generally do HR kinds of complaints to help out small towns who don't have HR departments. It's hard to tell. But when I did that interview, they couldn't state a legal basis for the interview. I asked them, no, we can't tell you why we're allowed to do this. I went out voluntarily and I answered every question. And if any of you want to listen to an hour and 15 minutes, I'm glad to give you the recording again. Okay? I have it. I'm not keeping it secret. I've sent it to a few people already, so feel free to ask. Then, 4 months later, I resubmitted that court. I want to know what those complaints are. And the town refused the quarters on the 26th of May. Let's see, that's 9 days later, but they cited no authority for refusing. So I filed a lawsuit the next day and said, give me the records. I'm not kidding. And I want them because I want you all to see what's in them. I don't know what's in them. Nobody knows except the people who've been complaining, if indeed they are complaining. So I filed that suit, and on the 11th of June, CIRSA, our insurance company, came down, kicked me out of the meeting, and said, we're going to do a strategy for defense against Mosley lawsuits, which obviously is probably the core lawsuit, not the financial one. Let's just help. In the middle, can you still hear me back here with rain? Okay. In the middle of all this, you guys know I filed a full warrant. And that's a lawsuit that says, is an office holder sitting in the office legally? And that was against Dennis Stern. He failed to resign from his trustee position before he accepted the mayor position. Probably not a huge deal. So why did I do that? We were in the middle of a dispute about Buc-ee's, about the ballot initiative. And the problem is, if you've got Mike Oyette and Dennis Stern both illegally in office, and the votes don't go where Buc-ee's wants them to go, Buc-ee's can sue the town. So it was just an ask to the court, please resolve this so that we can avoid future fight with Buc-ee's. Because it's a big company, we're probably going to get our butts in. So that was all that was about. It's still open, by the way. A lot of people think it's closed because the judge who got that case, Judge Prince, he retired last month, and so they had to transfer it to another judge. But it has been transferred to another judge. Now that lawsuit was not cheap. I'm just on the back of the envelope. Let's say that was $25,000. So I've got a lot of motivation for the town to make me an offer to cancel the lawsuit. Okay? If the town doesn't get me to cancel it, or if I cancel it without court finding, I don't get that money back. So I've got a little tiny bit of a chance to get the money back, but it's not a huge deal. I just want you to know why I'm not just doing this before. Okay? All right. So anyway, CIRSA held this identity session, and all the other trustees know what the strategy is. I don't know what the strategy is. I don't know what they're talking about, and I'm not so sure that they have the rights to kick me out of the room, but they did. Okay? So, more status of the investigation. So, the letter I have in my hand, you can see up here it says, it differs from what was said in the board meeting, and it differs from what was said verbally before we took it over here, and it differs from this. I've got 3 versions of what the charges are. I don't know what the charges are. It's ice and infractions. I trustee, it concludes that by me asking financial questions of the staff and maybe raising my voice, that I was harassing, that it was sexual harassment. It was really difficult to harass anybody else because most of the people who do our finances are female. Okay? Sorry. And I'm perfectly willing to say sorry if you will tell me what the complaints are. Now, the letter also alleges stalking, and I can't wait to get to that slide. Okay, the investigation only interviewed the female staff members that were still in the admin section. We had 5 other people leave recently. Steve Workett, Jeremy Dundon, he was fired from the water system, Kathy Neal, who? Yeah, Jen Wild, one other. Okay, anyway, we had others, and trust me, I can actually come up with names. 3 of those are male. These people were not interviewed to see if I'm really a harasser. So that's just a piece of baseline information. Okay. Now, Christy Berkland got up and said in VOT about 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago, she got up and she, by the way, her statements were very heartfelt. You can tell that she's very unhappy and very angry about this whole situation. But in that first statement, she said, and Mosley's already admitted to 2 of these infractions. That's not true. What I did was in the interview with the Recorder's Council, as I said, there's no doubt I raised my voice. That's the way I communicate. If you're being resistive, I will raise my voice. And let me tell you, I don't have any interactions with the staff that's not resistive, except with Glenn. Glenn and I get along, which is pretty interesting to me. But anybody who thinks their job is being risked because they made a mistake, they resist. They don't understand. I don't care about firing. I can't fire. It's just not possible. So there's a lot of misunderstanding going on there, but I don't know any of the complaints at all. So how can I admit to them? And other than the unsubstantiated charges in the complaints letter, I have no actual complaints. I haven't seen them. I have no details. I have no dates. I have no locations and no witnesses. I know absolutely nothing that I'm being accused of. All right. And I've asked for it officially. Now, when I ask, and that's why the lawsuit's out there are 3 reasons that I'm entitled to all this information. Number 1, I'm a subject of the complaint. I get to know what the complaint is. Number 2, we have suggested from our second attorney, Whitmer, that we should put code into our town code so that they can fire me. Right now, we don't have code that allows you to fire an elected official. Okay? An appointed official, like the administrator or the clerk or the lawyer, 4 trustees can vote and give them fire or dismiss. Let's use the word dismiss. Okay? But you can't fire me with the code we have now. It requires a quasi-judicial court-like structure with a judge and a prosecuting attorney and then my defense attorney. And you also got to get the stuff in the code. We've already spent somewhere like $10,000 just to write the draft code. And because I'm a trustee and I get to vote on the code, I have to know if it's justified to spend this money to do the code, okay? I mean, it's kind of weird. And then the third reason is Cora. I can Cora town records and I should be able to get them. And the investigation's over, there should be no restriction. So for 3 legal reasons, I have asked for these records and I have gotten zip, nothing. Why? I don't know. All right, let's go on. Okay, let's talk about stock. So I did a dumb thing. I mean, even Beth Harris immediately said to me, oh, geez, that was stupid. So on the 15th of December, Atis and I asked for a special board meeting so we could accept Crofts' resignation on the 16th. So we had to get it noticed by 5 p.m. on that was a Monday. He was leaving for Atlanta on Wednesday, so we had to do it the next day. So we asked for the board meeting. The staff couldn't support it. Erica had to take a kid to the dentist or something, I don't know. It was a medical kind of thing, they put off on us, and we were sensitive to that. But I found out then that our deputy clerk couldn't support it either. And I had heard that sometimes the staff wasn't really in the office as much as you would expect. Now, there's a reason for that. There's a thing called flex time. When you come to a board meeting and you sit there from 6 p.m. to 8 or 9 or 10 at night, you get to take that time off during break or duty, okay? I had asked twice by email, what is our flex time policy? And I had not got an answer. So I went down to the town offices on the 16th, and I sat outside in full view, watching the comings and goings at the town office. I was just curious, am I gonna see anything that tells me something or not? Probably didn't. But I was out there watching. The reactions in the building were evidently quite bizarre. People were frightened by the trustee sitting outside watching the activity. Well, I take a little blame for that, but I don't understand this fear and guilt reaction that was being evidenced by the staff. I talked to one person. Jen Lyle came up and said good morning while I was sitting in the car and went back to the office and proceeded on her business, okay? I followed no one. There's no identified victim. I don't know who the victim is at the damn stop. And as I say, the reaction in the office was quite pronounced. And I don't understand that either. So let me just say that I deny this, and you guys can come to your own conclusion about it. Okay. So, where's the fault? If Rob had come to me with this handful of complaints that he waived on the 11th of December, or even with the one complaint, the very first one he got, and said, you're scaring the staff, you need to take it easy, I would have said, oh geez, I'm sorry. I mean, and now I understand, yeah, we'll modify that a little bit. Not one word. Has never come to me. The same thing holds true for Glenn Smith. He has now pushed this investigation and has not once protected the staff by coming to me to say, we don't like it when you act. Please modify. Not once. That was Rob's duty, and that is currently Glenn's duty, and that's what it says in the employee handbook, to do it immediately, to tamp this stuff down, at the very beginning. And so here I am. There's evidently this pile of complaints out there. I don't know what they are, and nobody has done anything about it. And the first thing the employee handbook says is, take the complaints to the perpetrator and have a chat. I would appreciate that. Okay? So, let me talk about the history which has conditioned the staff to be uncooperative. They're also sometimes not just uncooperative, unresponsive. I'll tell you about one example. About 6 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago, I sent an email both to Eric and Glenn that said there's an error in our reimbursable invoices. These are invoices that we give to developers to pay us back for all work we're doing for them, okay? The amount of the reimbursables for Buc-ee's alone was over $400,000. A lot of money. The mistake was only $3,009, less than 1%. It's not the money. It's the fact that there were errors in the reimbursables, which means two things. Number one, they're not using the accounting system to generate the invoices. Okay? Now, any of your accountants or have used spreadsheets and stuff, you can do reports. And you can build a report in a way that will pull the money out and put it in a new spreadsheet for you to utilize. The fact that there were 3 mistakes in 6 reimbursable invoices tells me two things. It's manual and it's prone to errors. And nobody's taken any steps. Nobody's talked to me. Nobody's called me back. Nobody said, hey, we'll take a look at this. Nothing. Okay? I consider that to be unresponsive. Now, it's not the money. It's the fact that I would like to have these things that we generate and we build people with, I'd like them to be active. Now, we had a really good session this year when we built the 2026 budget. Glenn and Christie did a really good job. They exposed some expenditures that us as trustees were not very aware of, okay? I thought they did an excellent job. But Christie's not an accountant. And so in some ways, we can't expect our staff that don't have the background to build the reports. But we just hired an accountant, and I can't remember the name. Anybody remember the name of the company? Anyways, it's a company you recognize the name of. And now we have the accountant. And I hope that this will solve some of these problems. But I want the staff to acknowledge when I point out a problem, just acknowledge that they'll work on it. Okay? So that's a real issue. Now, one thing I didn't talk about that I really ought to mention. Let's see. Well, it's not on this slide. Let me just tell you about it. You know, back when we did the financial lawsuit, you would think that if you lost every financial person in the town, staff, it might get somebody's attention. Julia, our financial clerk, quit. 2 months later, our accountant, Fromm Associates, quit. 1 month later, Green Associates, our auditor, quit. All the same year. Now, to me, that was telling me something, that something's going on in the financial system, and I can't find out what it is. Now, Green came back and did the audit the next year, but then he left. He did re-engage, but he did resign temporarily. But that got my attention, and I was quite concerned about that, because I thought there was some funny business going on. Although we never saw, and Kevin Dreyer, to his credit, asked me in the board meeting, "Do you see any sign of theft?" And I said, "No, I'm not a forensic auditor, but I don't see any sign of theft. All I see is misuse." Okay? So you have to decide, is that terrible or not terrible? You know, it's up to you guys. I filed a lawsuit, we'll see what the judge says. The issue with the lawsuit, by the way, is there's a thing called immunity for like public servants and towns and that kind of stuff. And so filing against an individual is very difficult. You have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was purposeful fraud committed. Okay? So the staff is pretty protected. Is the town protected? Well, that's an issue because generally speaking, the town is protected, except when it comes to doing contracts, like signing contracts for the PLES road or the water operations. The town is actually considered to be a corporation, not a municipality. And so there are some legal issues that maybe the judge would say, yes, this is a valid lawsuit, and maybe they'll say, nah, this is really going too far, nothing important. And we'll find out. Now, a lot of people think it's been dismissed. No, it's at the appellate court, and the hearing is on the 1st of September. And if they send it back down for a hearing, then we'll actually get to present evidence. They may not send it back down. The issue is, I just want everybody to remember this, the Supreme Court, the Colorado Supreme Court, is very interested to resolve the test case on this particular law, because it's never been adjudicated in Colorado. So I don't know, we'll find out, I guess. All right. And just for everybody's information, I'm about ready to finish. Our lawyer made us commit when we said, well, let's go do this. After we sent the demand letter to the town and nothing happened, he said, if we do this, you will have to commit to $100,000 in 2 years. Took us about 6 weeks to think about that. But you know, we decided, yeah, I think it's something that we need to do, it's worth doing, and we'll see what happens. And it's not the money, trust me, it just took a while to agree to that. But I think it is a worthwhile thing to do. And maybe not just for Plum Lake, maybe for all of Colorado, to stop small towns from taking money in grants and misusing it. Okay? Now, what happened in the BOT just last week? Chaz said we have a new project. It's called the Shady Lane project. Whoa, very interesting. And he said, and by the way, it's going to take us 3 years. We're going to do it in 3 pieces, and we're gonna push some stuff off and whatever. Well, why would I mention that now? Because the money, the ARPA money that we spent, $750,000 that was supposed to be spent on capital improvement projects, was spent on maintenance. And if it had been spent on a capital improvement project, let's pretend Shady Lane, although we may not have known about that at that time. But let's just say that that's the intent of that money, was to fix those kinds of things. And we didn't do it. We misspent the money. Now, nobody stole the money. They spent on things that were good for the town, right? They fixed things, fixed pumps, fixed leaks, whatever. The problem is, it violated the Appropriations Act that created that money. And that Appropriations Act is law, and it's passed down with the money all the way to the checkbook in the town. Sorry, that's just the way the law works. So I couldn't close my eyes to it. Here we are. So now you know why the staff, and Roger in particular, maybe Marty, are sort of at odds. And I can see why the staff would want to get rid of me. I don't have any question why. The question is, are they trying to do it legally, and do they have real complaints, or is this a dream of Crob's? Because you guys know that when his son was indicted, who did KRDO ask for a comment? And Marty. And I don't think that there's any love lost between us since then, okay? So there's this whole ball of not so much happiness rolling around, and it's causing people to do things, and maybe do things that are beyond the code, okay? So that's all I got to say. I'll answer any questions you've got about any of that, or anything that, by the way, that Atis had to say. Here it is. Yes?
Quick yes or no. I have two questions. Is Glenn Smith an Apple employee?
He is.
Is Erica Romero an Apple employee?
She is.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna add one thing to that. Okay? Now, because they're appointing officers, it takes four votes to dismiss, okay? But so is the mayor, Dennis Stern. You know why? He wasn't elected mayor, he was appointed. He was elected as a trustee. But once he left that job, he is now an appointed officer. And it's just an interesting sidelight that if we were mad enough about the fact that he avoided the recall that he was obviously open to, that maybe the trustees ought to take it upon ourselves, to say, we're gonna vote you out, okay? But we decided not to do that because it was getting to be like a circular firing squad. And I've said in public meetings before that Dennis has some very positive features. He's very interested in the fire department. He's very interested in the budget. I think he does a really good job of letting people run over their 3 minutes when they want to speak, as long as they're sticking to the, whatever. So I won't say that excuses everything, but I'm just saying that if any of you think that I dislike him and that's why I want him out, you'd be wrong. Okay? Any other questions?
Just a reminder, as I said before, Dennis was one of the 3 trustees who got a petition to be recalled, but he got to be appointed mayor. So it's not necessarily our personal feelings or whatnot. The citizens at one point said, we don't feel he's a good trustee. Now, as far as at will, that's kind of standard in Colorado. Your employee are appointed at will. However, if there are charges regarding whether it's Glenn or Eric or whatnot, then there's a different process. And that's one of the reasons why I've asked as a referral to the Attorney General and the DAs, some of the things that they've been involved with. I mean, it's somewhat questionable, and unfortunately, we don't have criminal lawyer, advice. So I want, someone who's neutral, which is a CBI, or an Attorney General, or my client, the district attorney, to make a determination and let you know, hey, this is valid or not valid, and then we'll go from there.
Did the mayor make that request to the CBI?
No,
Only the mayor can make the request to CBI.
no, let's see,
No.
the details that I've been told is that the AG has to refer it, or the DA has to refer it.
Well,
to
that's a
SCBI.
different case.
Yeah, they're right.
Right.
No, they got it, but they don't, they're not required to do it.
I knew a trustee couldn't do it.
Right,
No, we can't demand the response, we can send it to them, but we can't.
We asked them to take a look at it, and it's up to them to decide whether or not they want to do anything with it.
Yeah, as long as it came from the DA or the AG.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, because when I talked to the
Or the police
CBI,
chief could do it too.
well, unfortunately.
Well, let me just tell you a little story about that.
Never mind.
No, I'm gonna tell you.
Oh, go ahead.
So we sent independently, okay, he sent a package, I sent a package from a person that had the impacts on me individually. The DA wrote me back and said, you should go to the police chief with this complaint. I went, excuse me, the police chief, the complaint was about the administrator. And I said, you're asking me to go to the police chief, who is the administrator, to complain about the administrator? What? So I wrote him back a letter and I said, excuse me, you don't generally send the complaint from the victim to the perpetrator. Okay? And, you know, I use that word perpetrator, probably too strong, you know what I mean? But anyway, that's the note I got back from the DA. I don't accept that. Okay?
I would,
Yeah, so.
So on that topic, obviously, you were trustee back when Chief Smith was maybe interim administrator. It seems like that's not a good setup to have someone reporting to himself for many different reasons. Was
Yeah,
there a
and
discussion
Glenn
about?
has publicly stated, you know, he's not, really, he just did it, thinking to be a short term.
Right, well, I'm not saying it's Glenn's fault, I mean, the board appointed him as interim administrator. Was there any discussion about maybe also appointing an interim police chief so that we wouldn't have this reporting to yourself, situation? It's not a good.
To be honest with you, I would say no. I think that's, well, part of it is, as I mentioned before, how did we get here? We had a lot of changes in personnel, both on the trustees side, the mayor's side, as well as the town staff, and things kind of get shuffled, pushed down the road because, well, we only have 5 trustees, or we need to have 7 to make a decision like that. And we started with SGR, I think last fall, late last fall. We got through almost the 5 list, and then people resigned, and kind of threw everything in chaos. And then,
Do we know when we're gonna start interviewing?
hopefully we'll have some answers this board meeting on Thursday. Last board meeting report we got